Listen to the Vibes.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Listen to the Vibes. And I'm very happy to welcome Benjamin Owen here, and he is a personal coach. We're going to get to learn a little bit about what he does. And before that, just tell us a little bit more about you.
Hey, Kyle. Thank you so much for having me on the show. An absolute honor to be here and to share with your listeners. I've been a professional coach since I was 21, maybe 22. Can't really remember. And I've had the luxury of working with people through personal transformation since I was very young. I've always been really interested in helping people perform at their very best. I was an elite athlete when I was younger, and I just really wanted to achieve the highest pinnacles of my career. You know, I wanted to go to the Olympics. I wanted to be the best at my sport. And I was very, very lucky to have some amazing coaches. And I was lucky that there were sports coaches. And even though they were sports coaches, they had a real big part of my life. They were like mentors, and they helped me through some of the biggest challenges and struggles in my life. You know, when my stepdad passed away when I was 18, I'd go down to the track and I would have my coach just, take care of my training. He'd ask me questions about my life, and he supported me. This figure in my life became very instrumental, and I just wanted to do that for other people. And the thing I noticed in my life, I was exceptionally talented. I was a very talented young man. And despite this extreme amount of talent, it wasn't met with a stable, consistent ability to perform. And that's where the self-sabotage came in. I would always seemingly, I didn't even realize until I was like 30 this was going on. I would seemingly have huge highs followed by crashing lows. I'd do something like win a national championships, and then I would go and get drunk and then not fulfill a race meet that I needed to go to the following week. And it was just kind of this boom or bust attitude that I had as a young guy. And it was okay. I was young. Yeah, at the same time, these boom and bust things got bigger and bigger as I got older. I tore my hamstring, which ended my running career. I would go out and drink too much alcohol on the weekends in front of clients, even though I had a sterling reputation in my business. And what I noticed was I didn't really, like I said before, I didn't really understand this was something that was going on for me until I was wise enough to start saying, hang on a second, actually, there's some level of self-sabotage going on here. I'm not where I want to be in my life, despite all the money I've poured into self-development. I didn't like the Ferraris and the Porsches and the expensive cars. I had a really expensive personal development bill. And then it came to a head when I was around about 30 years old, where my marriage, I'd only been married for a year, and that ended in divorce. It wasn't, a big thing. It was just the wrong person, but it was the way that I dealt with that. When I got kicked down, it wasn't a knockdown, it was a knockout in my eyes. And I really, again, did some things I wasn't proud of and just dealt with it in a really terrible way. And I was really out of integrity as a coach. I had a couple of people who were paying me to help them with their life and their transformations and their fitness. And I was just out of integrity. So it got to the point where I really needed to take some action and started to implement everything that I had learned about. And this was everyone has these stories, but I think it's your darkest dark is your lightest light. It was this moment I was standing in the shower, had a headache, and I was like, this isn't right. I'm so tight. I'm so angry. I'm so pissed off with myself all the time. I keep missing the mark. I keep not breaking through. That put in place a series of decisions, which then led to me discovering a number of massive changes in my life that helped me start to overcome the self-sabotaging patterns of behaviors that I could spot. And as if by magic, my relationships improved. I met my mentor, who's now my business partner, my business partner, Pete, as well. And we created something called the Awaken Man Project, which was where guys just like me could come and get help. And it was it was a big shift. And what I wanted to part on the people listening is that these are really subtle things. Like self-sabotage is such a subtle, nuanced behavior that if you can spot it and label it, you will change your life. You will change your life. And And as before the interview, Kyle, you mentioned that it's something that's happened to you. I just want to ask, like, how do you think self-sabotage showed up for you in the past?
And I'll tell you, when I was young, I loved to draw, I loved to paint. I had an opportunity to get with a really good painter who would train me to be better than what I was. I I blew it. I didn't even want to go. I tossed it out the window. Well, that was an opportunity that I don't know why I did that, but I just did. When I'd have a relationship, and it'd be a good relationship, I would do something stupid to ruin it every time. When I started my career working with the city, I was working my way up. I made supervisor, and I probably could have gone further on, but I would do stupid things to hold me back. It seems everything that I approach, as soon as I am about to hit that pinnacle, I do something that just puts me right back down at the bottom again. And I don't understand, why do I keep doing that?
Mm. Yeah, I can resonate. Same for me, and same for so many of my clients. I've been doing this so long. I've noticed it in clients, and and Carl, and I think the people listening as well, is that sometimes we feel like we're broken. We're the only one who does stupid shit like this. Is that we give ourselves such a hard time. I've worked with Wall Street bankers. I've worked with barristers, lawyers, solicitors, high paid people, managers, CEOs, everything, to professional athletes, and everyone does this. Everyone does it. And like for me, that was like, hang on a second, this is like it's uniquely human. It's just like we believe we're somehow broken or fallible, we fail because we have this pattern in it, and it's not. It's what makes us human. And I want to share with you in this conversation, like, first of all, the understanding about what this is, and because I think this is like the theory behind it. I only learned when I worked with a guy called Phil Stutz. So Phil Stutz, if you haven't heard of him, if you're listening in, he wrote the Netflix documentary Stutz with Jonah Hill. Jonah Hill from Superbad and famous Hollywood actor, and Jonah was one of his therapy clients. He's a very, very famous therapist in Hollywood, and he follows the work of a guy called Carl Jung, and it's very, very deep in well-researched psychological practice, and I followed his work because he talks about this thing called part X. And part X is this part of you that is there to quote unquote, F up your life. Like really, it's there. And if you're honest with yourself, if you're listening in, if you you just explained, I just explained, it's always been there. It's always been this self-saboteur, this part of me. It's just a part that if I allow it, it can take hold of my relationships, my attention, my sex life, my performance, and strangle it to the point where I can't move forwards. And across all the people I've ever coached, I could see it. It's like there's this part of them that's just running the show, whether it's an inner critic, whether it's a high state emotion, whether it's a narrative. And I was like, hang on a second, how come I'm getting some of these such like high performing people like yourself? You're a high performing man. You've got this big force for growth and desire to do good in the world. How come you're doing this dumb thing like sabotaging yourself? I couldn't explain it. And he came up with this narrative about part X that really, really spoke to me, and it made a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. And the way that he explained it is Einstein's theory of is it Newton's? No, Newton's third law, not Einstein's. Newton's third law is that, if you remember like high school physics, it's like every force has an equal and opposing force. And like, I get that in physics in the real world, but like, what about spiritual physics? Now we're going deep here, guys, so hold on. Yeah. And it's like Kyle, you've got a big force for growth. You do this podcast. You want to give to the world. You want to create. You want to get people and share the vibe. And this is a big part of growth for you. And so you're going to be met with an inner force, which is going to oppose that, which is your part X. So it's every force, like a force for growth, has an equal force, which is a force for destruction. And this exists everywhere in the world. It exists in the body, it exists in nature. And I was like, that makes so much sense. So the more I'm trying to drive to change the world, I'm going to be met with this force for destruction. And it's up to me to battle that every single day. And this is where I started to learn. It's like, right, okay. So it's not just a thing like, and this is something I learned about self-sabotage. Sometimes we do just something really dumb in a moment that sabotages our relationships or a performance. Like for me, it's not paying attention to detail. In the moment where I'm about to do an exchange with a client where I really need to slow down and book it in and be really precise or pay attention to money, I speed up and I would railroad through things. And I'd have like podcast guests arriving and I didn't even know they were there. Or I would have a deal where I didn't write the right amount on the invoice down. And all these little things, these details I'd miss were the things that my mentor at the time said, Ben, I think you self-sabotage. And I was like, no, I don't. I'm always trying to grow my life and grow. He's like, no, you self-sabotage. Look what you've done there. And that's a repeated pattern for you. And I was like, oh my gosh. And for me, that was like a real signal to go a mile deep on this. And this is where I started to unpick the work, I've been talking about. Is this making sense, by the way, Carl? Because it can kind of...
Yeah, but I have a question though, because something that I've thought about here in the last few minutes is it because I'm afraid that while I'm doing something and I make a mistake that I'm going to ruin it? And so instead of that, whatever happens while I'm trying, why don't I just go ahead and screw it up? That way I can just get it over with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I think that's where there's a real distinction. There's two things that go on in self-sabotage, which is conscious self-sabotage, which what you said there. I consciously make a decision to block myself. I consciously do something I know is going to be a hand grenade to my success. It's just like you're conscious about it. I think trying to think of an example of this is you're having I don't drink anymore, but I'm having a beer with my pal. And I know I can't drive after that second beer. I know I can't. I know the second beer leads to the third and the fifth and the 10th. Yeah, I still consciously make a decision. It's just that, and it's not a judgment. It's like I know that if I have that second beer, I'm consciously deciding that my tomorrow is going to be more difficult, and that's conscious. It's okay, and it's like, okay, that happens a lot. And equally, there's unconscious self-sabotage. It's self-sabotage that you don't even realize that's going on. And we're going to talk about that, how to spot it in a second, because that I think is the more disruptive of the two. Because I think there's moments where we decide, do you know what? I'm not going to put myself forward for that job interview. Or I'm not going to turn up to that job interview. I'm not going to go and put myself onto a dating site. Whatever we opt into. But sometimes it's when we subconsciously react to something and we do something dumb, which is even worse. And I think that's the one that happens way more frequently. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, because I guess I'm afraid of failure. And so instead of I'm putting forth the effort and I make a mistake, I'm just going to go ahead and make the mistake. But you're saying there's two parts to this. It's conscious and subconscious. So I guess what I'm trying to say is true. And then there's that other part of me that just doesn't mean to, but does it.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that part of the tools, part of the stuff that Phil Stutz talks about is this idea of the reversal of desire. And what we need to train ourselves to do is reverse the desire to move away from pain. And with a lot of clients, what I'm often doing is selling them pain. I'm like, listen, push towards your pain, push towards the failure, and that's where you'll get your success. And so we get clients taking risks every day. And I'll talk about risk in a second, but risk is a big part of learning about self-sabotage. Like, oh my gosh, there's a risk coming up. and I'll do something to stop me from moving into the risk. So yeah, it's a big part of self-sabotage, definitely. And so what I noticed that it wasn't just about these conscious sabotaging patterns where, like I said, explain that. It was more the unconscious, where moment to moment, my attention would be spoiled or taken away by little tiny habits that robbed me of my most valuable asset, which was my attention or my state. So think about this, like you're listening in, you're doing the dishes, okay? You're doing the dishes and you're about to go and maybe write a script or film a video or go and do some great work. And then you just all of a sudden you start to have this like naughty, angry, pissed off voice in the back of your head that starts to say, and it starts to run a dialogue about your boss, about how he's a pain in the ass and he's not great. And as you're doing the dishes, you're winding yourself up to the point where you're so toxic about what you've just been thinking about. Your state's gone, your attention's gone, your happiness is gone. And then you're expected to go and do great work. You're driving. There's a story about the wrench, the guy. He drives past the garage on his way out into the desert, and he drives past the garage, and he drives about 400 meters down the road, and his tire it pops, so he's got to change his tire. He can't find a wrench in his car, so he walks back to the garage, and as he's walking towards the garage, the guy's in his head going, I bet he's not going to lend me a wrench. Oh, I bet I'll get there, and he'll have a wrench, and he won't even give it to me. And I bet he's got a wrench, he won't give it to me. And he'll even try and charge it. And he just winds himself up to the point where he walks into the garage and he just shouts at the garage owner. He goes, fine, effing keep your wrench, and walks out. it's like, and it's like the Jack story, the wrench story. You might have heard it before. But I think that's what we do is we wind ourselves to the point where we can't connect, we can't move forwards. We can't go on a stage. We can't take that big gig. And that's part X. That's that part of us that's there to steal the very thing that will move us forward in our life, which is our state and our attention. And again, it's self-sabotage. But we've never really looked at it like that. You're not in there. You're not in there, brother. Is that hitting for you?
You're hitting home.
And like I said before, part X will your inner enemy will convince you that a knockback is a complete knockout. And I am forever, like I work with about 50 guys on a daily basis. I've got a men's group. It's super powerful. I'm forever saying that, dude, this is just a knockback, not a knockout. And like when they see it like that, is that your inner enemy will help you confuse a knockback with a knockout. It's like, Kyle, this is game over for you, not just a micro failure. And when you can reclaim that, it's like, oh, this is just a knockback. It helps you to get back up way quicker. And life is going, it's inevitable. Like, one of the three constants in life is pain, uncertainty, and constant work. They're the three constants. Like, you can't guarantee anything else but those three things. And like, you're going to get knockbacks. But if you confuse them with being flawed, that's when part X, your sabotage has won. It's like, if you think about this, and a lot of people have asked me in the past, well, why on earth would this negative, stupid thing, why would we do this to ourselves? And my only explanation is the way that the brain is being wired. It's the most important thing for the brain is it's a survival mechanism. It keeps us safe survive over thrive. And if I can make tomorrow the same as today, even if it's a shitty tomorrow, I've got prediction and response, and that's what the brain is there to do. So if I've got this part of me which is there to create certainty, safety, patterns, it serves me to not push too much, not to grow too much, because growth is dangerous. It's like, it means there's going to be change, growth and change. So it's a really important thing to acknowledge, is like, there's a part of your brain, not all of it, just a part of your brain, which is there to make tomorrow the same as today. And if it does that, it's won. And you've got to actively bring your whole self to overcome that part every single day. It's a recommitment every single day. Mm-hmm. And this is what I often work with a lot of people. I worked in the fitness industry for a long time. And people think that they're exonerated from that. They'll have a good couple of days and they can take the foot off the gas, and then bam, inner enemy, sabotage himself. Friday, most people have they work all week, they work hard on their diet, and it gets to Friday, then they take the foot off the gas and they build back up and they start again on Monday. And so this is what I saw for years, and I was like, there's got to be an explanation for this, because it's deeper than just calories and support groups and stuff like that. So the first one, which you just mentioned, the first symptom of part X is noticing it's a complete helplessness. I can't really say that word. It's just confusing a knockback with a knockout. That's the first one. The second one is a primal, primitive urge. Now, for guys, if guys are listening in, this will be that when you sit down to do your best work, or record something, or produce something, or go and do some sales work, or reach out to whatever you do, you get this massive desire to go and eat. It can be to jerk off. It can be to scroll. It can be to do something that's totally irrelevant, like hoover the house. It's just like this primal urge. It's like, oh, I've got to go and do that. And you give into temptation. You dip into that. It's like, okay, I'll just go and do that. And in that moment, what's happened is you've been robbed of your attention. Your attention's gone onto something else that's not going to move you forwards. It's probably going to take you backwards. Again, part X, inner enemy, has won. Do you recognize that, Kyle?
Oh yeah. And then you feel so guilty after you've given into that temptation.
Yeah. And I noticed this with scrolling. So I work at my laptop, like probably you do imagine, and I would be like, I'd have a work block in my calendar to go and write something and create. And I just like, oh yeah, I've really got to have my phone in my hand. And I check my phone, like 10 minutes had gone by. And then all of a sudden, I haven't got enough time to do the whole session. I've got to go on to my next call. I've lost time to mindless scrolling. So that's the second one, a primal primitive urge or an impulse. And that was a big one. When I teach guys this, they're like, oh yeah. And so what you've got to do with this is you've got to learn when your impulses are coming up, what they look like for you. It could be alcohol, it could be drugs, it could be scrolling, it could be pornography, it could be food. It's normally a vice of some description, and it grips you in the moment where you're about to do something to risk your soul. It's a big thing. If you want to control a man, fracture his attention into tiny little pieces, and he's powerless. And look at what's going on. Look what's going on. And this is what there's a war. There is a war going on, and the war is your attention. Like your attention is the biggest real estate in the world, and the companies that are out there know how to fracture your attention. They know how to keep your attention, maintain your attention, and that's the inner and outer war that you've got to wage every single day. It's like reclaim your biggest asset, which is your attention. And for me, that's been difficult. I think I've borderline got ADHD, but I've never got it statemented. I've never got it because I'm like, it's just, I've got a very fragile attention span. Mm-hmm. So I've got to do everything to help me maintain that. So if you're listening to this and you're resonating, it is part of a sabotaging mechanism because if you think about this, if your attention is gone, there's no chance of you moving forwards. So reclaiming your attention is a big part of what I do with clients. It's like really, I say to clients, focus, like reclaim your focus. And this is where you start to see high performing people move forwards because they develop this potency with their attention and their presence. Men start to be really present with their partners. They're not double screening. You get people on sales calls that can really, really hold the space and focus on the client. You get fathers who can stop scrolling and be with their kids so they don't feel as guilty. And this changes, guys, massively. The first step is spot it, label it. It's like, and this is the first thing I get guys to do. It's like, I got you. Like when you play pool, like, I don't know, American pool, I don't know if it's the same as British pool. It's like you have this thing called that you get snookered. And like when you play your buddy in a game of pool and he snookers you, you're like, you got me. Like, you had me in a corner there. And this is what you got to start doing is like, so I'll be, the thing is that you can't, it's a part of you that's never going to die. It's never going, but you've got to, it's your internal sparring partner. It's there to get you stronger. So I'll be on my laptop and I'll be writing, and also I'll pick up my phone. And I'm like, oh man, you got me. I'm talking to this part X, my inner enemy. I'm like, oh, you got me. You stopped me from moving forward. I can see this. And now the moments where I most want to scroll or most want to sabotage myself, I know that I'm on the verge of something big. I know that I'm doing great work. I'm doing sole purpose, risky work that's going to risk me, my soul in front of the world. And it's the same when I go on stage. So I speak on stage across the world. I've spoken in all, countries across the world. And before, I'll have this narrative that I'm going to mess it up. I'm going to make a mistake, that people aren't going to. And it's this part of me that, and again, this various parts is knockback versus knockout, primal primitive urges and impulses. The third one is a narrative that you've been victimized, that you're the loser.
Mm-hmm.
Hey Ben, don't go on the stage. The previous speaker is way better than you. No one's going to listen to you. And like,
I do that
like,
all the time.
Yeah. And it's interesting because like I've been speaking since I was young. I was like 22, 23 when I started getting on stage. And I've been on all these courses and these things to help me learn how to speak better. I still get it. And it's like, I thought I would like one day be so well educated on how to speak on stage that I would be free of this voice. And it's still there. So I was like, hang on a second, this doesn't fit. So you'll never be exonerated from that voice. You just got to learn like, right, it's really loud today. I'm really going to have to, I'm about to do something really big.
Mm.
And I love that. It's a really great way to start looking at life. You're like, oh my God, I'm really getting a lot of push in those moments. It's like, well, actually, when the weight got heavier, you got stronger. And that's the thing. It's like these moments where you've got to really focus, you got to push yourself, you've got to go for a walk if you can't go to the gym. You're like, this is the biggest test for me. This is the moment I'm going to grow. And like we know it in the gym. And we know pain is good in the gym. Like when we're in the gym, like when you feel the burn, you're like, oh yeah, this is good. But yeah, we decontext like out of context when we have to have emotional pain or risk or worry or fear, we run the other way. And what I help clients do is run towards their fears. So one of the sessions I'll do with a client, I'll just ask like, if I had no fear, I would. So I'd say to them, if I had no fear, I would, and they'll answer the sentence again and again. And I'll just write down the list and like, that's your list of goals. It's just like, and they achieve them. They're like, oh my God, and they're like, I hated you. It was scary. It was fearful. I wanted to kill you. But yeah, my life is different because if I had no fear, I would go on that first date with Sarah from work. If I had no fear, I would go on Tinder and start my dating. If I had no fear, I would go for the promotion and ask for a bigger salary. And the first thing I do with clients is just get them to go and do it. It's so amazing. It's amazing. And they just push into the fear. And yeah, it's incredible. So what happens is like you start to create these games and experiences with clients or people I work with that are risky. So we get them to take risks. And those risks start paying off. Yeah, they take 10 risks and only 5 pay off, but they start to realize that life grows when you take risk. And that's probably like, where I want to kind of finish about self-sabotage is that what is it all trying to do? What's self-sabotage stopping you from doing? It's taking risk, taking these micro risks every day where you're showing up, you're pushing yourself, you're growing. And if it can shut that down on a conscious or unconscious scale, it's done its job. And so if you want to fight this part of yourself, it's a daily practice. It's a daily practice to spot it, label it, and say, there are tools, and but I don't think we've got enough time in the podcast to go into it, but there are tools that you can use to fight this part of yourself. And when clients start to do that, their life just changes. It's amazing. And you see people who have been limited for years start to take risks again, and the risks create momentum, and the momentum makes the life just like go, doo, you know. So it's that's where, and I just want to attest to this because I noticed this in my relationships, I noticed it in my finances, I noticed it in all parts of my life. And I'm still going to make mistakes, and I'm still going to make probably some self-sabotaging mistakes. But when I got really present with this, my life changed. And I've seen it with clients as well. So if you're listening to this and you've listened this far in, I'm really grateful because you've given me and Kyle your attention, your greatest asset. And as if there's anything that you want to ask me about, I'm happy to. I love this stuff because I know how powerful it is for people. And when you do this work, this is the work that changes your life. Yeah, I'm quite evangelic about that.
So if people want to get a hold of you, do you have like a website?
Yeah, so we have the Awaken Man Project podcast. So I work for a company called Awaken Man. I set that up with my business partners. So the Awaken Man Project podcast, we talk about everything from relationships to money to all sorts. Like we've been doing what Carl's doing as well, just growing that steadily over the years. And we've also got a specific podcast which is 7 parts, and it's all about self-sabotage. And it's called, and you can find that on innerenemy.com. So it's innerenemy.com. And we've actually there's a small charge for it because it's so valuable. And what people pay for, they pay attention to. So we've said like a small charge, like $20 or something. And that will it'll pop into your Spotify or your whatever podcast you listen to on. And you can listen to it. And me and Pete go a mile deep on Inner Enemy, and we go through some of the tools. And it's the very same things that we teach our high-paying clients, and it really works. So if you want to go, and you can also follow me on at Coach Benjamin Owen on Instagram. I'm just one of those people that if you say hello, I say hi back, and I'm like a real person. I'm not. Do you know what I mean, Kyle? Some people on Instagram are just like after the followers, I'm after the relationships. So yeah, man. Hopefully, this podcast gets out to as many people as possible, because I think it's something that is not talked about because it's not sexy and it's not happy and it speaks to the darker part of the self. But yeah, it's powerful.
Well, what I'm going to do is I'll put all your links in the description to make it easier for folks to find you. And man, I can't thank you enough for coming on here. You've opened up my eyes to a lot of things that I'm doing.
Hey man, we'll just spot it and label it, and give me an Instagram message when you spot it as well to say, dude, I've just seen it. It's the knockback versus the knockout. It could be the primal urges.
Well, again, thank you. And I also want to thank all you folks out there. If you are new to the channel, well, I hope you'll come back. Hit that subscribe button. From our regulars, you guys are awesome because you make it possible for me to do this. And until the next one, everyone, please take care. Be kind to one another. God bless and peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Listen to the Vibes. You can catch us on Buzzsprout or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, and on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook at The Vibes Broadcast Network